Hi everybody and welcome back to Tales of Wanderlust. I'm Cass, this is Jasper, and today we're going to answer some of your questions. So for those that reached out with questions, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. We're going to touch on 5 of them today. Things from if I think the Airstream is worth the price, to why I hit the road, to what our plans are for the future. So if you're curious on a few of those Q&A type questions, then stay tuned. This will be a little bit of a different video for us today since this is our first Q&A video on YouTube. So if it is something that you end up enjoying, feel free to comment below, let me know, and we can look to do more of these in the future. So we're going to jump right in and start off with a combined question from Larry and Roberto. It's about why did we hit the road full time and why am I traveling with a dog and a cat? So to start with the dog and the cat, I adopted Napoleon back when I was in college, so I've had him most of my adult life. Jasper I adopted when I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I worked in an office at that point, so he was really my hiking companion, my weekend getaway companion, and we were really weekend warriors at that point. Then the 3 of us packed everything up, we moved down to Austin, Texas, and we lived there for a couple of years. When I first got to Texas, there were so many places that I wanted to check out, but it was just me and the animals. I didn't have any friends in the beginning to travel with. So I started doing trips by myself and checking out the area. I owned a Subaru Outback at the time, and it's long enough in the back. If I lay down the back seat, I could stretch out a sleeping pad and a sleeping bag and sleep in there extremely comfortably with enough room for Jasper. So we would work from home during the week because I was a full-time remote employee at that point, and then we would go off on the weekends and we would check out different areas and go camping. 2 of my favorite memories in Austin was the first trip we did in the back of the Subaru, which was actually heading up to a state park near Dallas, Texas. It had dinosaur tracks in it, and it was a really cool experience to see those. I also called an RV park trying to find a spot to stay for the evening in the Subaru. They didn't have any campsites left, but they did have an area next to the barn that we could park. So we paid $5, parked next to the barn, and slept. Funny part is we didn't realize there were roosters, and we were awoken at around 5 a.m. It was a really great way to get an early start and get to the state park before everybody else woke up. And then my absolute favorite trip that we ended up doing was going down to Big Bend National Park. I took a long weekend from work. Jasper and I drove down there. We toured the whole entire park. We slept in different campsites every single night. We actually went across the Rio Grande and crossed into Mexico together. And then we took the boat back and we came back to Big Bend. It was really quite an amazing trip, and that's really when I got the initial bite of Wanderlust and really wanting to get out there and explore. It also taught me that I could travel on my own, I could do this by myself, and with this one by my side, it was actually a lot of fun. So once I had done those trips together, I realized that travel was something that I really wanted to do. And being a full-time remote employee, I knew that I could travel, check out different areas, and take my job with me. What I originally wanted to do was stay in short-term apartment rentals and travel the country that way. From Boise, Idaho to Colorado Springs to Oregon, Washington, I called all over the place trying to find a short-term apartment rental as my next stop. But all of the apartment rentals that I called wanted to charge a short-term rental fee plus an application fee, plus a dog fee, and it really was going to be uneconomical. So I actually purchased a Class B van, and I had decided I was going to quit my job, just travel in the van, figure things out on the way. I was binge listening to the RV Entrepreneur podcast, trying to figure out how I was going to make money on the road and trying to figure it out along the way. In a way, thankfully, the Class B van actually had some major maintenance issues, so it didn't end up working out. I sold it about a month after I purchased it. At that point, however, I had already sold most of my furniture, I was moving out of my apartment, and I really didn't have anywhere to live. Thankfully, I had met friends in Austin at that point, so I moved in with them for a little while and tried to figure everything out. The blessing in disguise is when I bought that Class B van, I paid somebody to do some work on it and I put a few $1,000s into it. Then when I found out that the engine was going to have problems down the road, and I ended up selling it at a loss. So I lost some money on that Class B. I didn't have enough money saved up at that point to just hit the road and quit my job. It caused me to reassess all of my plans and see if there was a way to still travel while keeping my job, because I had to make up that money that I had just lost. I actually rented another apartment in Austin at that point, moved in, and then it struck me. I could live in apartments all over the country and do my job, but I could also live in Airbnbs. And they were a way that I could do a shorter term rental and then travel on to another spot. So I ended up canceling my lease at that apartment. Luckily there was a 30-day clause. And I threw most of my belongings that I had left into a storage unit. I packed up a couple of bins, put them into my 4Runner, put Napoleon Jasper in there with me, and we took off to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we stayed in an Airbnb there for a week. It was just a trial run, and we actually came back to Austin, Texas after that. I ended up loving my time at the Albuquerque Airbnb. We would work during the day, we would go out and hike or eat at different restaurants in the afternoon after work, and it was such a great experience that I knew that's what I wanted to do. So after returning to Austin, I flipped out a bunch of stuff in the truck, figured out what I wanted to take with me, and that's when we officially hit the road full time. So that was back in November of 2017. For 8 months after that, I traveled all over the country and we stayed in Airbnbs. I really loved my time in the Airbnbs because you got to meet the different hosts, you got to experience the local town, and you could usually ask them for really good recommendations, and it was nice to have that kind of social aspect of talking to your Airbnb host. I set a budget so that I didn't go over what my rent would have been in Austin. So by breaking down that budget, I usually didn't have enough per night to get my own space or rent out my own house. I was always renting out a spare bedroom. Well, after 8 months of doing that, I really started missing my own bed, my own kitchen, my own bathroom, and I was ready to have my own space again. But I was not ready to be done traveling because I really loved our new lifestyle. So that's when I started looking back at RVs. So I was sitting in my Airbnb in Boise, Idaho, figuring out which RV I wanted to buy. I decided on the Airstream Basecamp, drove to a local dealer with a measuring tape, measured it all out, made sure everything was going to fit, and then I called around to a whole bunch of dealers all over the country to see what the best price was. At that time, base camps were nowhere near as popular as they are today, so there was actually a few sitting on the lots that the dealers were trying to put on clearance and get rid of. So I was able to get a really good price from a dealer in New Jersey, and I was heading back east to visit my family anyway. We've now been living in this base camp since July of 2018, and it's been our home ever since. Jasper has returned for our second question. So our second question is from Dave, and it's, do I feel that the Airstream is worth the hefty price tag? So in short, yes, but to give you the full answer, we're gonna go into why I ended up spending this much money on an RV. So I did look around at different RVs during the buying process, and one of the reasons I ended up with an Airstream is I wanted something that didn't feel like your typical RV with all the wood and the valances and the darker colors and things like that. The Airstream is one of the more modern looking RVs out there back in 2018 when I was looking. Now there are a few brands that have redone their interiors. They look a lot more modern, but at the time, Airstream was really the only one. Another reason I went with the Airstream is due to the name brand and the known longevity. Airstream trailers depreciate much slower than other trailers do. So going into the RV buying process, I knew I was going to be buying something that I was going to be losing money on over time. In doing my research, I found that Airstreams had one of the lower depreciations, and I knew that when I put my money into the Airstream, in the end, if I was going to sell it, I hopefully would get a good amount of my money back out. The other thing is, if I ended up keeping the Airstream, I wanted something that I knew would last. With the way that these are built, all by hand, riveted together aluminum shells. They tend to last much longer. All in all, I felt like it was a good quality decision. But all of that together does not mean that the price tag didn't scare me. Putting down that much money on an Airstream really was nerve-wracking. So I tried to look at it from a logical sense. When I was living in Austin, I was paying $1,400 in rent plus utilities. And I knew that if I had stayed in Austin and wanted to eventually buy something, I would have had to rent for 2, 3, 4 more years before I could save up enough money to buy a house. So for me, how I looked at it is if I could spend that much money on rent and just throw it out every month to a landlord, I could also invest that kind of money into an RV, which in the end, I could actually sell and get some of that money back. Not all, but some of it back. So my mental calculation was 2 years worth of rent is what I was willing to spend on an RV. That ended up being around $35,000. So back then, base camps weren't as popular and were nowhere near in the high demand that they are today. So I was actually able to pick up this base camp for around that price, brand new, back in 2018. So for me, that's how I justified the price and looked at the depreciation value. I can tell you in the end, I am extremely happy with the decision, especially because today the base camps are becoming one of the best-selling models of the Airstream line. With that, the price is holding pretty steady. My depreciation on this is very minimal, and I know if I had gone for a regular standard trailer, it would have been much more than what I'm looking at today. So in the end, is the Airstream worth the price? To me, absolutely. It's exactly what I want in an RV. It's homey on the inside, it's modern feeling, it's well built. I hope it's gonna last me a really long time because of the construction, and it's an Airstream, so it has a lower depreciation. With that said, spending this much money on an RV is not for everybody. So if you are looking into them, I would just take that into consideration and really see if it is something that you want to spend at the time, or if there are other options out there. Which flows right into our third question, which comes from Michael, and that is, were there other RVs that I looked into? And if there were, why did I end up with the base camp? There were other RVs that I was looking into. My options were pretty limited because I wanted to keep the 4Runner, and that means I needed an RV under 5,000 pounds. Living full-time also meant I needed an RV with a big enough bed for myself and Jasper, a regular sized shower so I could stand up in it, wash my hair, and also a good sized kitchen so I could cook, because I love to cook and I wanted to make sure I had room for that. When you go in the small trailer market, you will notice that the kitchens are tiny, and I really wanted something where I could spread out and cook almost like a normal kitchen. So I made a long checklist of what I really wanted in an RV, and after doing the research, it really came down to 2 options. It was either the base camp or it was the Tab CSS. The Tab is a larger teardrop trailer where you have the table that converts into a bed. There's a small kitchen on the inside and then a wet bath as well. I had a deposit on a Tab, but I ended up withdrawing it and going with the base camp instead. And the reason is because the Tab shower is curved at the top, so it's just ever so slightly short for me. So if I wanted to take a shower in there and wash my hair, I would have had to crouch down, duck, and it would not have been comfortable. The shower in the base camp, I can actually move my elbows, wash my hair, and do everything like a normal shower, and it felt much better. The other thing is the kitchen in the base camp is much bigger, so that was definitely a selling point. Tab also makes a trailer called the Tag, which is a small teardrop with just the bed on the inside and some storage, and then the kitchen out back. I still love that trailer, and it has a little place in my heart. It's not really the best unit for full timing, although some people have done it in the past, but it's just a really great little trailer. If you're looking for teardrops, I definitely recommend checking those ones out as well. So our next question comes from KM, and the question is, what is my favorite work setup in the base camp? Well, I've tried many along the way. My absolute favorite is using my small standing desk on the front kitchen counters and standing up while I'm working. It's the easiest on my back, it is the lowest in terms of setup time, and I can also cook while I'm in meetings, which is a huge benefit. So some of the other setups that I've tried is when I first started in the Basecamp, I actually carried a 21-inch monitor with me, and I would set it up on a larger table every single day with my laptop. This took 5 to 10 minutes to set up every single day, and honestly, that was just a lot more time than I wanted to spend. It was also a really big and heavy monitor. So that only lasted a few months, and I donated that monitor very quickly. Next, I moved to a small USB powered monitor, which was 15 inches big. I tried having a clip on top of my laptop so the monitor would be above the laptop, but that was kind of a pain. It was very unbalanced and it would collapse a lot. So that did not last very long at all. Then I moved into working from bed, and that really hurt my neck because I would have my laptop on my lap and you're staring down at it all day. So my boyfriend, who does woodworking, made me a custom lap desk. It is wide enough to have the monitor as well as my laptop, and there's a ridge in it so the monitor can sit in that ridge, lean back at just an angle, and I also have room for my mouse. So I worked on that for a good amount of time, but I still found that having the monitor and the laptop was more setup than I wanted to do in the morning. So I have since retired that monitor. I still carry it with me in case I have a meeting where I really do need the dual screens, but for the most part, I just work off my laptop. I do still work on that lap desk as well. It's big enough now that I don't have the monitor that I can put snacks or lunch on the one side, work, and still have my mouse. So it's really great. That is how I usually work when I need to do heads down data analysis or those kinds of things. When I have a task and I need to do it myself, I really think the best when I'm sitting down. But I spend about 80% of my day in meetings. And for that, having the stand up on my kitchen and being able to move around, pace, walk outside through the side door if I wanted, that really makes it a much more relaxing work day for me. So usually what a work day is I get up, I set up my laptop on the kitchen, I make breakfast while I'm in my meetings. I usually have a couple of hours to get some work done in the afternoon, and that's when I move into the bed with the lap desk. And then I finish my work day by going back and pacing around the kitchen, taking my final meetings, and having my laptop on the counter. So in the end, after all of those different setups, the laptop stand is the one travel computer accessory that I do really recommend. And that brings us to our final question from Jay, which is, how long do you think you could or want to keep up this lifestyle, and what are some of the changes you've dreamt of to make your experience even better? So in terms of the question of how long could I do this for, a very long time. You really do get used to living in a small space, moving around, having shorter showers, going out and getting groceries once a week because that's all you have room for in your fridge. And it really becomes a way of living that is comfortable and is fun. So I could personally do this for a very long time. Now, in terms of how long I will keep this up for, COVID has changed that a little bit. So I still love living in the RV, but I have actually spent a lot of 2020 at my boyfriend's house because with the travel restrictions, with not being able to go out to restaurants and check out different places, it really makes traveling a very different lifestyle. One of the things I loved about living on the road is going to different towns, trying out the different restaurants, going to festivals, meeting new people. And that is really hard in 2020 and a COVID year. So the thought of having my own home base has really started becoming something that I'm considering. So I've started looking at either buying land that I can park the RV on, or buying a small cabin. I also do have a boyfriend who travels extensively for work, so having a home base where he and I can both go do hiking, fishing right out of our backyard, and then go off on our own separate travels. That way, during the really busy summer months or during COVID times, I have a place where I can go and I can relax. I also won't have to worry about finding the crowds in the summer for different campsites because it has become extremely busy at boondocking areas over the summer because everybody's trying to find things to do this year, so they're trying out camping. So I would love to have a small cabin as a home base and then be able to go out on part-time trips. At this point, it's what seems really appealing to me. What I love the most about how I live is I have the option to change. So I live in an RV full-time now. I could potentially live in a cabin and RV part-time in the future. And if I end up not enjoying that, I can always go back to RVing full-time. So I'm leaving options open. I'm searching around different real estate in different areas that I've seen that I enjoy. And if something comes up that piques my interest, I might end up getting something in the future. We'll see where we end up. And in regards to Patreon, we do have a page that is set up. So if you're interested in receiving weekly video updates, monthly Ask Us Anything videos, postcards, or travel stickers, I'll paste a link below in the video description and feel free to join us over there as well. So that's it. Hopefully I answered all of your questions. Thank you for sticking with us through this Q&A session. If you want to see more, comment below. Let me know what you think. And if it is something you enjoy, we can start doing more of these again in the future. So thank you for listening to our story, and we will see you next time.